Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Let's Talk with me, Joe Emilio. And once again, I have a very, very interesting man with me. He was on my show not too long ago, I think 2 weeks ago to the day, where we discussed. Oh man, what did we discuss again?
The eternal apartheid.
Yes, that's right, the eternal apartheid. We discussed that. Please go check that out if you haven't yet. Quentin is a very fascinating man, and he's a Pora, which makes him even more fascinating. Same joke, different day. So we are here to discuss a very interesting topic. I think it's one that is on everybody's mind, especially like across the world, across the globe. Everyone's talking about it. We've been talking about it for years. Marxism versus free market. Now, full disclaimer, I think both Quentin and I want to say this, that we're not experts. Like, I'm not an expert in economy. I'm not an expert in Marxism, or I've had experience in the free market, so I'm going to give that opinion. I know definitions and all that stuff, and I know the pros and cons more or less of Marxism. Quentin, do you want to also give your bit of a disclosure?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, my background is actually in clinical psychology, although I did study obviously in the humanities department. So I did a full year of sociology where the university turned me into a Marxist. And that lasted for quite a number of years, in fact, until I graduated and I started working and then paying taxes. And then learning that actually, hang on, the government doesn't have all the answers. But I've always remained quite interested in the Marxist ideology and especially the Marxist critique of ideology because, well, it was so seductive to me in my youth, and I see its seductive quality still permeating society. So it is a super interesting topic, and I'm looking forward to digging into it with you, man.
Cool. All right. So with that out of the way, let me define them first. Let's start there. Let's define them so that, and this is according to Google. I know people like using the Oxford Dictionary or whatever, but I don't have time. So Google is quick and easy. By Google definition, free market is an economic system in which prices are determined by unrestricted competition between privately owned businesses. That's a free market. Other people might call that capitalism. It's also
Mm-hmm.
debatable. And then Marxism
Can
is,
I jump in just with my favorite definition of capitalism,
of course,
which is Thomas Sowell's definition, which
okay.
is that capitalism is not an ism. It's closer to being the opposite of an ism, because it is simply the freedom of ordinary people to make whatever economic transactions they can mutually agree to.
Exactly. And then Marxism definition is the political and economic theories of Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, later developed by their followers of form, to form the basis of communism. That's a Google definition. Okay. So with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, I see there's already quite a few people on the chats. Hello, Kyle, Beth, the Punisher, all the normal suspects, and Chico. Thank you guys so much for joining us. And I see you guys are having a bit of banter in the chats. If you do have any questions or if there's any topics you do want to bring up, please do. But I think let's just get right into it. So let's start with Marxism, because that's the biggest thing right now, and it tickles me when people don't. It's almost like these people now, right? They want the NHI, they want the EWC, they want all that stuff, right? Then when you try and tell them, oh, that's Marxist, or oh, that's like communist or whatever beliefs, they almost like, no, it's not. And there's a group that think like, oh, it's not. No, this is just, we just want equality. We just want that. We just want this. Like it's for a good cause. Then there's the other camp that says, yes, we want communism. We want that because it's better than capitalism, because white monopoly capital and all that bullshit. Um,
Right.
so so then when you point them, then you're like, okay, but you don't realize that if we go down this path, we're going to be like Zimbabwe. We're going to, like Zimbabwe, Venezuela. Communism has killed, a crap load of people, um, just from starvation and all that stuff. So when you say that, they always have but that's, you see, like communism's never been truly tested.
Right.
Uh,
That wasn't real communism.
yeah.
Yeah.
So What's your opinion on that?
Well, yeah, I've run into that sort of frustrating line of argument many times. And, the one thing that is true of people who say, that wasn't real communism, what they're really saying is if I was in charge, I would do it better.
Yeah.
And in a way, it's kind of like this false moral superiority that they might have, you know. And that's really where I think this debate becomes quite interesting, because the Marxism debate is very much a moralistic debate about inequality and the failure of the free market to provide, an equal opportunity, an equal outcome for people, rather. So, yeah, it's very frustrating to hear that wasn't real communism. But what was real communism was the gulags of the Soviet Union. And I know anyone who's familiar with Jordan Peterson has probably heard of him talking about Alexander Solzhenitsyn. But he wrote this book, The Gulag Archipelago. It's I've got it over here. I read it January of last year, actually. And really brought to my mind the horrors of that system. One story that really sticks in my mind, and I tweeted about it the other day, is every time Stalin was having like a big political speech, the first person to stop clapping, like everyone would do a standing ovation, and they would watch for the first person to stop clapping, because that person would get sent over to the gulags. Like, you could be imprisoned for almost anything. And the way Solzhenitsyn kind of describes it, he's like, okay, so, when a person is first imprisoned, they sort of have this protective mentality, like, oh yeah, I didn't do anything wrong really, so I just have to explain my case, and then the reasonable people will let me go. But that never happened. Once you were labeled an enemy of the state, that made you basically a persona non grata, and you were just fodder for the gulags and the work camp system that they had. And that traumatic tension, realizing that you as an individual, before the power of the state, is basically helpless.
Yeah.
That sense of that and is probably the worst indictment of Marxism that I've ever read.
Do you think? I find a lot of similarities with this whole. And I think, sorry, there's so much going through my mind right now. Let me take it back a moment, because this is something else that is a problem, and I think this will lead me to the point I was trying to get to. One thing about people who support Marxism and communism and socialism, for that matter, because Marxism is socialism. Socialism, when it is like, let's play this out in South Africa, right? Let's say the ANC get to do EWC, NHI, economic radical transformation, all those things that we are very scared for them to do in the name of equality, okay? And they redistribute the land, and they redistribute the wealth, and they redistribute everything that they said they would. Okay, I always say this, like, and I think you also brought this up last time, like, what now? Like, because in true socialism or true communism is the people get to distribute the wealth equally, but there's a big flaw in the system, which is the human aspect of it.
Yeah.
The theory is beautiful. I won't argue that. Yes, equality for everyone gets the same thing. It's a great idea, because now we don't have these classist issues and stuff like that. Fine, right. Fair enough. But we're still human. Those that are in power are greedy. I mean, sure. I think only Marx himself, would probably be the only human that would have might have been like, okay, I'm going to make that transition from socialist economy to communism. I mean, but we don't know. He might have been greedy as well. I don't know, and kept everyone, and ruined the entire country. I don't know. We'll never know. But if there's anyone that had a chance of doing it, it would be him, because he came up with the theory. So I think that people need to realize that humans, when we get a touch of fame, or not even fame. It's not even about fame. It's just money and power and all
Power,
that
yeah.
stuff. Yeah. It's like a king, and this is what I was going to ask. It's like a king and queen situation. Those that were in power in those times did not want to give up their power. We had war. We had people killing each other over kingdoms and empires. It is the same thing. A dictator is no better than a king or a queen, in my opinion. When the way they treat their subjects and the citizens, and bow down to me, and you're not allowed to do this, and you're not allowed to do that. You can only work with this person. You can only do that. But if you do that, it's like Patel, who said we're closing the economy, or we're not going to have what's it?
The e-commerce, right?
The e-commerce, yeah, because it's unfair to those who can't do it.
Mm.
That alone, I mean, I'm not making this crap up. He said this, so
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, that alone is a communist way of thinking, and there you go. People that are in power are now implementing these kinds of regulations and stuff like that. I mean, yes, now he's let it go, and we're free. But again, now we're like the peasants or the subjects, going like, oh, thank you, sir, thank you so much. And that's how I look at it. I see it as a kind of kingdom. And if we think for 1 second that someone with so much power is just going to be like, yeah, I made, you know what? I made my money. I made these billions and trillions of dollars or rands. And you know what I'm going to do with that? I'm going to give it all to you. Really? Really?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's one of the main flaws with the Marxist. First of all, the Marxist reading of history as the history of the class struggle. I mean, I understand where he was coming from, but
Yes.
I sort of have a different reading of history where I feel like it's the history of man's fight against poverty and the natural state of being, which is nasty, brutish, and short.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But sorry, I just want to move around real quick to one other thing. So like the definitions of socialism and communism might not be clear to everyone. And one thing I always hear from people, and it's astounding to me, which is like, yeah, man, socialism is not so bad. Look at Sweden, look at Denmark, they're socialist countries. That argument is used so frequently, and it's completely false, because those are what are known as basically the welfare state, which is almost like the de facto European government in the West, in Western Europe at least, which means that there's a free market with government intervention in the economy, sure, but they tax individuals quite high. They have progressive income taxes, and then they use those taxes to create a social welfare system. That's technically a social democracy or a welfare state. Socialism is when the state owns or controls the means of production entirely. And communism is actually when the state falls away.
Yes.
And you have a communally owned and communally controlled means of production. But as you said, it's almost like a kingdom, because what's always happened in a Marxist country is that the state never falls away. It never progressed from socialism to communism because of the human element. Those individuals in power never give up power. And one of the most widely accepted sociological definitions of the state is the entity that maintains a monopoly on the use of force. So any law that the state makes is upheld through force. And in socialism, you have to give complete power over to the state.
Yes.
In fact, in Marxist-Leninism, they have this idea that once the revolution happens, you must establish a dictatorship of the proletariat. So total power of the working class, and they must now control everything. And that's why in Marxist states, first of all, you can't have like religion. They want to abolish every other structure, which they call it part of the superstructure of society. Maybe we can get into that a bit later. But like, they want to take over the role of the family. They want to take over the role of religion. They want to take over culture. Everything has to be controlled by the state, because through that, they're able to maintain people in what I think is a form of bondage, really, because they control where you work, where you live, how you eat, how you sleep, all of those kind of things. I don't know, in that classic line in Scarface, when he's like, what, you are communist, mate? a Jewish sheep, mate. You
Yeah,
want to
yeah,
be a sheep? Yeah, that's really how it was.
yeah.
So if you're willing to give that much power
Mm,
over to the state, you should really question
mm,
the people in control, because
mm,
it's never happened that they've voluntarily relinquished their power.
mm,
It's always been they've had to have some kind of uprising and
mm.
stuff like that.
Yeah,
So
and the scary thing is a lot of what you just said is happening in South Africa,
yeah,
it's being hidden over the or it's being disguised as we're protecting you for COVID. And yes, okay, fine, the regulations have eased up, but there's still a lot of laws and weird things going on. I mean, everyone. Why do you think? I mean, the fact that our court has said that the lockdown regulations of level 3 and 4 were unconstitutional. That
yeah,
tells you right there the answer that this is not. They went too far. The government went way too far, and that should worry people. You should be asking questions like, okay, yes, it was all for COVID, but again, and I've said this. I think I've told you this or someone else. Like where we are now in level 3 is where we should have been at the very beginning. And you made a very good point just now, talking about the middle class. You said, oh man, you said something about the middle class, uh, and it just made me think about how the regulations of the lockdown have done that with our middle class.
oh
Where
right, the history of the world is the history of the class struggle, right?
Yes, the class struggle. But you said something about the middle class. I can't remember, like something about controlling them or using them to that effect, and or restricting them, and that's exactly what's happening now because the middle class in South Africa definitely felt the lockdown. We stayed inside. We tried to adhere to most of it as possible. Whereas, and again, I know the dynamics in Kailicha and all those areas. It's impossible to do the lockdown. You're
Yeah,
squished up in shacks with 4 or 5 people. I get that. I really do. But you start to wonder when you start to take a step back and look at the regulations, who is it really for? It wasn't for us. I'm sorry, it wasn't for them. It was for us. And what you just said about the middle class, I think hit it on the nail. And if anybody's watching, listen carefully to that sentence because it should open your eyes a bit. That the kind of direction this government wants to go in. But yeah, you touched on other things as well. But I'm going to go to the comments now because I see that there are some questions coming in. So we have Mitch Luthi, who is saying, I'm curious about what you guys think about Marx, and he says in quotations, from each according to his ability, to each according to his needs. Obviously, a quote from Marx. And what he intended that to mean. Well, okay, so. Okay, that is I feel like that's an open-ended question, if you know what I mean.
yeah. I want to answer that by making reference to what Marx actually thought um, was the driver of capitalism. Actually, the word capitalism is a Marxist word. It is to describe the economic situation where the owners of the means of production, the people that he called the bourgeoisie or the capitalist class, they own like the land, the factories, and stuff like that. And everybody who works for them or in their own smaller kind of way don't own that many means of production. They were known as the proletariat, the faceless. Okay, and all they had was their labor. And he had this thing called the value theory of labor, which means that so the capitalists, they just own the land and stuff like that. They own the raw materials, the means of production, factories, whatever. But what gives their product its value is the labor that people have to expend to create it. And because the proletariat only have their labor, they sell their labor to the capitalists, who then exploit their labor and skim off all the profits from the top. Okay,
Yeah.
Marx is saying from to each according to his need, from each according to his ability, would say that, well, that sort of class dynamic, that system can't work.
Yes.
People should do what their ability it affords them the ability to do. Basically, their aptitude affords them the ability to do, and they should perform that role in society, and we should give to people in terms of what they need then to perform their particular roles. So no one's labor is getting exploited along with. You can do a particular job, you've got skill, you've got intelligence to do it, you should get into the position to do that, and then whatever you need shall be provided by someone else who's doing that on their end. And it becomes in theory a more equitable exchange.
Yeah.
So that's what he meant. I think, again, it's like you said earlier, it's an idea that sounds good in practice because it appeals. In theory, it sounds good because it appeals to this kind of, I think human beings, we're definitely social animals, and most of us sort of want to see our fellow human beings doing well and, living a comfortable kind of life. And we don't like to see people in poverty, starvation, stuff like that. So if you believe the idea that you can redistribute wealth equitably among society, it sounds appealing.
Yeah.
But in practice, it never gets to that point. And one of the reasons it doesn't, as I said, like socialism never becomes communism because the state never relinquishes power. But also, why I think a free market is superior is because there's choice in a free market. So you never have, like, if you hate Starbucks coffee and you only like Wimpy coffee, you never have to go to Starbucks, right? But in communism, Starbucks comes to you every day, and that's all you're going to drink for the rest of your life.
Because everyone's equal.
Well, exactly. But if those two businesses are, like let's say Starbucks and Wimpy were competing, right? They would have to create a better product. One would have to create a better product, a cheaper price than the other, maybe to attract, better staff. They have to pay better wages and stuff like that. And because of the competition, there's almost like this, how can I say, like an accountability mechanism built into businesses and the free market because of the competition with each other. With socialism and communism, the state is only accountable to itself. And that accountability mechanism, the freedom of consumers to choose and the freedom of people to actually work where they want to work and stuff like that is diminished or non-existent, rather, in socialism. So a long answer to your question, but that's what I think about it.
No, but you're right. I mean, I also think that one of, like, this whole needs thing. It's a very open. You can. This is what I don't like about this quote that was given is like you can interpret that in so many different ways. You can. The way Marx wrote is, I think you mentioned it when we were together last time. Is it's very difficult to read in some instances because I think that some of his quotes can be interpreted in many different ways, and that's one of them. There's definitely one of them. And here's the thing that I think also to your point as well. You cannot tell me that if we were all equal right now in South Africa, whether you're black, white, Indian, colored, foreign, whatever, and you had exactly the same thing as your neighbor, because we're all equal now. We have the same salary, we have the same car, we have the same house, we have the same, like you said, coffee, all that stuff. It's all the same, right? And you go to work and you get the same amount of money every day or every month, regardless of how hard you work, regardless of your initiatives or your ambitions or whatever. No matter what you do, you're getting the same amount every time. And this is what happens. People lose motivation. We as humans need to be motivated. We need goals. We need ambitions. I'll bring it to comedy, all right? And I'm happy to discuss this because I am a comedian, all right? So in our industry, there's been a huge debate, right, about who gets paid X amounts for if you're a headliner, open micer, a host, or a support. Each one has a different level or different tier of pay. How much, like whether a headliner should get 2,000 or 5,000 is debatable. But the headliner always gets the most. Then the support and the host and the headliner get the same. The support then gets a little bit less. Open micer, depending on who's organizing the gig, might give like travel expense, right? But never real pay. That's just how it is as an open micer. So now in a communist state, that falls away. There's no more competition. As a performer, I won't feel the
Yeah.
need to be better than my support or than the headliner so that I can get a hosting slot. You're suppressing creativity, you're suppressing ambition. Because me as a comedian, if I'm in the support slot, I want to do so good that I get booked next time to headline, or that I get booked next time to host. And with you saying, or with Marxist saying, not you personally, but Marxist saying, or communists saying, like, oh, well, we all get the same thing, we all get the same salary, then it's like, yeah, sure, maybe there'll be like a nostalgia for a few months. But then after a while, it's like, because it happens now, comedians get upset when, I've seen it, two big headlining acts got upset with each other because the club, and I'm not going to mention any names, but the club gave the one headliner more, because the whole idea is whether you give 2,000 or 5,000, it's a headlining slot. So no matter which comedian you have, if you choose 2,000, you must give every single headliner 2,000, right? So for example, for me to perform and I get 2,000, then I hear that you performed and you got, say, 2,500. That was the argument, like, oh, why did that guy get more? See, we're already in this situation already arguing about that, and then we're saying, oh, we should get the same but as a headlining slot. But a headlining slot, or if you're an open micer and you get 2,000, that's also going to be a big deal, because I've earned my right to be a headliner. I've worked my ass off to become a headliner. That's a headliner. For you to now give the same rates to an open micer is an insult in our industry. So those are the things that people aren't taking into consideration. People that work their butts off to become CEOs, or and yes, it's the capitalist kind of thing. But this exists no matter. I don't think you can have an economy without those tiers. I don't know. Am I wrong?
I mean, what you're saying makes a lot of sense to me, and people do need to be incentivized. And I think, having a reward for what you do is probably one of the greatest incentives. But also, I think, like, in a free market, people might not necessarily start a business in order to just make a lot of money. They might try to solve a problem. They might be like, I heard the story of the guys who started Uber. And I know Uber is not a very profitable company or anything like that, so it's maybe not the best example. But, it was just some guys going, well, it would be really cool if there was an app that could get us a taxi right now. And they started that whole business empire based on that and disrupted the transport industry. But an idea can balloon and can blow up because it solves a problem that a lot of people have. And I think great art is incentivizes that creativity, that problem-solving aspect of the human spirit. Whereas this was largely suppressed in communist countries because of the reason that they're always top down. So the state controls literally everything, all the economic activity, education, every single thing about it, including leisure time and stuff like that. The state would control. So when you do that, you rob the society of this emergent order of free market, which is solving problems through that incentive mechanism that we just discussed earlier. So a couple of years back, I have a couple of cousins that live in Berlin, actually, and it's a cool city, and it was a city that was cut right down the middle by communism. And I mean, you go there today and you can still sort of see those disparities of the East and West till this point. And that just goes to show you, like, in one particular place where it seemed like time stood still for a while, because that was like it was in the DDR, really, the East German Republic. Time kind of stood still, and the West was progressing on, ticking on nicely, innovating, all that kind of stuff. The East, they were so shit. They had these cars called the Trabants that were like... And the West was getting BMWs and stuff like that. So, that spirit of innovation is really stifled when the government tries to control economic activity and human creativity. So that's why I'm more of a free market guy.
Yeah, I think Chica also wanted to chime in here. This is, I don't mean to ignore anyone else. Equality of opportunity isn't the same as equality of outcome. Yeah, so I agree that there needs to be equality for opportunity, and I think that's the biggest problem here in South Africa. Not everyone, and we that's like a whole nother debate for another for another day. But it is clear to me personally that people, citizens in South Africa, do not all have equal opportunities. Now we can discuss this, like I said, for
Sure.
another 3 4 hours. But I think Marx had a good idea to eliminate class. Yes, absolutely. But if done correctly as well, because let's be honest, free market also has its flaws. You have cronyism,
Sure.
you have corruption as well in there,
Monopolies,
monopolies. Yes,
environmental degradation, no one to hold a company
exactly.
accountable for passing on the ill effects of what they do to
Yeah,
consumers. Sure.
yeah. So there's also flaws in free market for sure. So that's why I say free market, if done correctly, can also have, I think, the same outcome of communism but better. Because essentially, what could happen is everyone can be in the middle class.
Yeah.
Everyone can have the opportunity to earn enough money to live and provide for their families, which is essentially, as human beings, that's what we want to do. You work and do what you do because you want to provide for your family, have shelter, have food. I do the same thing. I try and do the same thing in my life. I work hard because I want to have food, a shelter, and do these YouTube videos. So, I joke, but it's true, who's to say that in communism we would be able to do this, have these conversations even, because something else that
No.
people don't know and don't seem to understand is when you're in full communism, media is controlled, art is controlled.
Yeah.
There are certain things you cannot talk about at all if full communism comes into effect, because we're all supposed to think a certain way, do a certain way.
Yeah.
Um, Even though, and it's weird, I don't understand. Maybe you can clarify. I don't understand this part of communism. As you just mentioned, what's supposed to happen is the state gives the power to the individuals, right? So if we have as individuals the power now, we have the wealth, we have the power, we own everything for the collective good of everybody else. So we're all now
Hmm.
equal. Who, in a sense, controls us? So now you and I, we're in a communist state.
Yeah.
We have different jobs, we get paid the same, blah 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 blah. We're in a communist state. What stops me from doing artwork? Like where's the law? Is there a law still around? That's the
Yeah.
part that I'm confused about. Like, does the police or authority or whatever army, those kind of people that make sure that law is kept in order, is it up to us to keep it in order, or is there some kind of entity or organization that makes sure that everybody stays in place and there's no murder and there's no theft and all that stuff? That's the part that I don't understand.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a good question. Look, I didn't read all of Marx's many writings, Marx and Engels, so I don't have the answer for that. But you touch on an important problem, which is like, okay, so what is the role of the state really?
Mm.
If you're in a stateless society, so a funny thing that always the communists did is they took guns away from people. So first of
Mm.
all, like if we gave guns to some, that would already make an inequality of the ability to use force. So how do you have a police force then, if and be sure that they
Yeah.
can't usurp power on their own in a stateless society? Okay, um, a big problem on the first hand. And one of the good functions of the state is to ensure people stick to the social contract. Like it actually enables the free market. If we know that a third party can step in if you don't stick to your end of the deal, then we are more likely to take the risk and trade. If we don't have someone holding a third party holding someone accountable, we wouldn't want to take that
Mm.
trade. So immediately there, I think this anarchist sort of mentality falls apart a bit for me.
Yeah.
Could it be that they would localize and have sort of smaller communities, and people sort of then get together based on shared cultural values, linguistic values, all of that kind of stuff, and they uphold their own norms and values collectively? Yeah, possibly. But yeah, I think if there was an asymmetry in something, and that's always going to be the case with human beings, because as much as we like to think that we're created equal, we're not created equal. I mean, I'm never going to play professional soccer.
Yeah.
Never.
Yeah.
I just don't have the build for it. I'm not fit enough. I don't have the coordination. But Cristiano Ronaldo can go ahead and make billions off of that. Tough shit. That's my lot in life, right?
Yeah.
So we will never be, we're not created equal, but doesn't mean that we shouldn't be equal before the law.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very important distinction I like to make between like communism and liberalism, let's say. So liberalism would say that the individual has equal worth before the law and inviolable rights.
Yes.
And responsibilities along with that. And communism says, well, economically, everyone should be sort of on the same level. There should be no class differential. And I don't know how you do that without violating the rights of individuals.
Exactly.
To express themselves fully. So that's a big antagonism in the whole theory that is unresolved for me.
It's so true, and that's why this topic is so fascinating, because again, it's like everybody pushes for it, but it's never been done before. And why do you want to try something that's never been actually done before? Free market is something that has been tried and tried again. Yes, like I said before, there are flaws. We both know this. You mentioned them earlier. Cronyism is a very big one. The harm to the environment. All this stuff, I agree 100%. And I think we are, as human beings, trying to do something about it.
Yeah.
We realize the errors in our ways, and we're trying to fix it. We're trying to bring down the corruption. We're trying to fix the planet. We're trying to be cautious about the planet. And I think human nature, in essence, is always, and this is something I think is a flaw also in communism. If you look at our human history, we as a species have always wanted to excel. We've come from caves, for those of you who believe in that, there was, like, okay, but maybe not go that far. Let's bring it more closer to recent history. Tribes always wanted to be better than other tribes. They wanted to conquer.
Sure.
They wanted to, you made better weapons, or you made better ways of communication and trading and all that stuff. We were always striving to be better, even on a tribal level. And even as human beings that are on other sides of the world, you look at American history. That was a culture that, we wanted to just invent all the time. The steam engine, the Industrial Revolution is an example, and that's actually where Marxism came in during that time. But yes, so it grew. That inevitably led to Marxism because of the things that were happening at that time. But that's also the thing that people forget. Marxism was alive, Marx was alive, 100 odd years ago?
150, like the 1850s, I believe, was when he was writing.
The world now is so different. In my opinion, free market has won that argument. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I think so too, man.
To even be having this debate with some people about but it's never been tried before. It's been 150 years, dude. Read the room.
Well, it has been tried, and it's failed every single time it's been tried. It's never been implemented the way they say it should be.
Yeah.
The purists, the apologists will say so.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, I don't want to give the impression that I throw the baby out with the bathwater, because I think there are some interesting things we can learn from Marxism that can help us to refine our system. So like you said, I think the free market has won, and I agree with you. But there was this guy called, what was his name? Sorry, I can curse, right?
Yeah.
Fukuyama. That's not a curse word. And he said, neoliberal capitalism is the end of history. Ironically, Marx also said that communism would portend the end of history, right? So there would be no class struggle, and history would pretty much end. But I think we can learn something from the failures of or the drawbacks of capitalism
Yes.
that we need to
Absolutely.
look at or of the free market rather, and we need to look at that and go, okay, well, how can we sort of diminish some of these issues? So I'll give you an example, like the bailing out of banks. I read a really cool critique of the bailing out of banks, which is like our system allows banks to privatize their wins and socialize their losses, meaning that, like the government will bail them out when they gamble and lose. And that's kind of like socializing their losses, right? Because the taxpayer has to foot the bill for that kind of thing. And for me, that's fundamentally against the free market ethos. So we should have legal structures in place to prevent the banks from doing that. And if they fail, well, maybe we shouldn't bail the banks out. Maybe the government, if they're going to bail someone out, it should be the individuals that have actually paid money into the system. In the mortgage crisis of 2008, they bailed the banks out. I'm not an economist, so if you are, correct me, please. But I would have thought, well, if they're going to bail anyone out, they should bail out those homeowners who were defaulting on those mortgages that were irresponsibly, lent to them. It's a difficult debate, but we can still learn something from a critique of the free market system.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I think that's, again, I've always said this, history. I think a big mistake that is happening now in the world, you see it now in America where they want to take down statues and stuff like that, and they want to change history almost. And I'm like, what we're supposed to do with history is learn from it. There's lessons to be learned.
Yeah.
And right now, when you take down a statue or you bail out a bank, that's not learning. That's weaponizing it. That bailing out the banks is like my mom gives me $20 and tells me to go buy chips or whatever, and I go and I buy a new Game Boy or whatever at the time it was, and then my dad's like, oh, don't worry, here's 20 rand, go get the chips. There's no repercussions, there's no consequence. So obviously the bank's going to do it again, and who suffers? Well, my dad's bank account. But it's just not. I get what you're saying, and I agree with you 100%. We need to learn, because free market, and again, I do believe that it has the potential to fix our problems. But if we can't learn from the mistakes that we've already made, then we're no better than communists in that regard. Because again, just like they keep on saying, yeah, but we haven't done the right one. We haven't done the right one. We can be on this side saying, yeah, but we haven't done free marketing. We haven't done it right yet. We haven't done it right yet.
Well, if that's the case you're making, you're actually correct, because South Africa hasn't done the free market right. First of all, apartheid was actually rather socialist. There were a lot of state-owned enterprises. I think it was Jan Smuts, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but he had the idea to nationalize the mines. So about 51% of all of the mines were owned by the state. States that developed the infrastructure and stuff like that. Okay, and that was in response to what was then known as the problem of the poor whites, because after the Second Boer War, obviously because of what the English did to the Boers, the reprehensible crimes of the Anglos, the Boer women and children in the concentration camps and all of that, like their economic activity was completely broken up. And from that historical grievance came this idea, well, the state should nationalize some of the resources, sounds familiar, and redistribute that wealth and raise up the middle class. And then when we transitioned to democracy, the state didn't give up any of its power, really. It just transitioned from one group to the other. We still have Eskom being owned by the state, number of mines being nationalized. But the narrative in South Africa is that, well, it was capitalism and that exploited the black working class. And now it's still white monopoly capital, which exploits the black working class. But that's utter bullshit. And all you have to do is go and Google the Heritage Foundation's rankings of economic freedom. And you will see that South Africa, I think, is around 106th, and it's mostly unfree from an economic point of view. Saying that, meaning that the government, the economic environment that's created through government policy does not enable the free market to function correctly.
Mm.
And that's one of the reasons why poverty is so bad in South Africa. And not only that, I mean, like if we look at Eskom, for me, Eskom is an underrated source of massive poverty in the country because, first of all, South Africa is blessed with an abundance of natural resources. What happens? You sell your rare metals to China, some kid in a factory makes whatever, and then you buy back the products of those raw materials. We have the potential to actually have a manufacturing economy, and it was like that until the Eskom crisis went on.
Mm.
But again, the problem was, how do you hold the state to account? If a private power company had to be held to account for shareholders, or let's say there was competition in the energy market as we have here in Holland, we can choose our energy providers. If the one's too expensive, we can move to another one.
Mm.
They would have had the incentive from the consumers to produce the electricity and sell their product at a reasonable price.
Mm.
The state was able to pass down the consequences of its bad decisions onto the taxpayer, constantly bailing out Eskom. Oh, sorry, we're just load shedding you guys and you got nothing to do with it. That lack of accountability that's built into a nationalized system really resulted in a lot of the problems.
Mm.
So, yeah, people are saying, oh, we need communism in South Africa, the EFF, the ANC, whatever. Well, you guys have been pushing that for as long as you've been in power. And actually, poverty has gotten a lot worse in the last 10 years. There was a time in Mbeki's reign where it was growing at a decent rate when they had geared the economic policies. But since Zuma got in,
Yep.
It's been a huge shit show. So just look at the Heritage Foundation's ranking of economic freedom and tell me that South Africa is a free capitalist country. It's not.
Yeah. You're right. I mean, the other day I was doing a bit of research and I stumbled on a website that showed the unemployment rate for 20 years in South Africa. So from now till 20 years ago, so 1999 or 1990, I can't remember. And they showed that when it got to the employment rate was quite high, even in Nelson Mandela's years. But when Thabo Mbeki took over, it went down, a low unemployment rate. And then as soon as he was ousted, with Zuma in. And I mean, that tells you the story. That tells you a very big story. And I want to go back to some of the things you said, not to debate or anything like that, but I want people to realize some of the things you said when you were telling, when you were explaining Marxism and communism and all that stuff. When we were talking about it, you mentioned the elitists, the capitalists, the what was the word you used?
Bourgeoisie.
The bourgeoisie, right? When Julius talks about white monopoly capital, that's the bourgeoisie. He is telling you the exact same story, just using different words, masked by racism. By the way,
yes.
You mentioned the whole communism don't like it if people have guns. What did Bekele say not too long ago? We want everyone to give up their weapons. People must pay attention to this kind of stuff because it's scary when you start to realize the similarities that are going on. And this is why I think this discussion, not debate, this discussion is very important because there are aspects that are happening right now, that should make your ears go, oh shit, the postponement of elections. I mean,
yeah, that's a scary one.
Oof. I mean, I don't even know where to start with that one. That just should not be done. But on the other hand, you do have some glimmer of hope, because I don't know if you know this, Quentin, but recently the court ruled in favor that the electoral system isn't constitutional, so they're changing it where an individual can now run for president in South Africa, which I think is a huge victory in democracy. Now, I've spoken to a few people, I won't mention their names, but they're a bit worried about this because they think that the ANC may be able to twist it in their favor. Now, I'm not going to have this discussion with you now, but the idea is that there is hope for democracy. And if people right now still have the power in their hands, regardless of what you might think, You still do. Because even if ANC and EFF, and yes, it is, both of them want to move the elections, if they manage to win that in court, and it has to go through the court first, if they manage to win it, we can still vote. And nobody must forget what they did to us in the lockdown. That's the key. And
100%.
we still have that power, and we need to use that power while we still have it. So yeah, that's. I see that we're approaching almost the end of the show. I don't know if you want to have any final comments to make, but I just want to give a few minutes to address some of the questions in the comments.
Yeah, no problem, man.
I don't know if you want to say anything.
Let's go to the questions.
All right, cool. Yeah, there's a lot, which is great. It's great. Everybody's been talking. I see some of them. Once again,
Yeah, I love engaging.
Yeah, thanks again so much, everyone, for posting in your questions. I'm sorry that I couldn't get to it right when you asked, but I'm going to try and look for them now. If you don't mind copying and pasting, that would be great. But otherwise, I'll try my best to. Okay, here we go. So yes, the divided party gave an opinion. I think an opinion because I don't see a question. Problem is, the role of ideas is usually not included in debates about capitalism versus communism. With communism, socialism, states control ideas. With capitalism, religious institutions control ideas. I don't know about that ending religious institution control ideas. Yes, I think in the free market that is a problem. I think that's one of the problems because there are religious influences in some cases. I do believe that. But again, this is what we were talking about before, where maybe the law needs to come in and say, "Hey, this can't happen," you know.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what that lady or gentleman means by religious institutions. I assume they don't mean the church necessarily, but Marx had he had this way of dividing society into what he called the base. So the base was like the economic mode of production and the relationship between people in the workplace. And then the superstructure on society was like religion, politics, the law, ideology. And so you can critique either level. And there was like kind of an interdependent relationship between them, although he did give primacy to the economic side on the base. And so I think what this person means is that, like, well, in communism, the state controls everything. But in capitalism, there is like an ideological undercurrent that is quasi-religious that keeps the system going in perpetuity. And I mean, I think that's a fair criticism, and that's I think one can observe that, like the thing that you brought up about, like, the difference in pay between a headliner versus an open micer kind of thing. That kind of unspoken but spoken rule keeps the comedy circuit going.
Yes.
Exactly. So it is a quasi-religious thing because you all have to believe in what is good comedy.
Yes.
You have to have like a higher ideal for that kind of thing. So fair point, but maybe I'm totally misinterpreting what they mean.
We'll see now. Oh man, I'm so sorry. I suck with names. Inside Digital. Help me out here, buddy. It's INNSAEI.
I would just say Inside.
Inside. Okay, I was right. Inside Digital says just made a comment, and I think it's an interesting one. Anarchism is just nationalism with extra steps. I tend to agree. And then he or she, it's a company, or he or she also has a question. What are your feelings on UBI, Universal Basic Income? Assuming it is inevitable due to automation, what societal effects do you see arising? That's an interesting question. Very interesting. You can take this one.
Look, I know that it's quite a contentious thing. What I've heard and what I've read about automation is that it was always assumed, and actually Marx also wrote about this, that automation would, take over most of the boring work and stuff like that, and would leave us with more free time and whatever. I don't know that automation will necessarily result in job losses. I think it might result in new industries that kind of emerge from that. So, like, Uh, yeah, when there are self-driving cars, for instance, that do away with the need for truck drivers and stuff like that, someone's going to need to, keep an eye on the code that's running everything, and that
Mm.
might be a new industry, So I'm a little bit skeptical that automation will lead to a shedding of jobs, but I also feel like if the robots are going to take our jobs, then fuck them. They need to pay our taxes, and we can and we can chill. But I don't know that that's sustainable. Again, as you said
Yes.
earlier, like the human need to do something and create.
Mm.
Like Freud said, work and love are the two most important things that give life meaning. And I really believe in the power of work to free people. And I mean, it's ironic because they say, you sell your labor in Marxism, but
Yes.
I think if you find something that you really want to do and you really love to do, you don't feel like you're working. So
Yes.
I feel like I'm working now because I don't like my job. But when I do psychotherapy,
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm working at all. I feel like
Mm.
I'm totally engaged with what's happening.
Mm.
And I think the same might be true for you when you're up on stage,
Absolutely.
when you're
Yeah.
telling jokes and when you're writing. It doesn't feel like work.
Mm. This doesn't feel like work. If I got paid for it, it wouldn't feel like
Yeah,
work.
yeah,
And like that's the thing as well with again with the whole Marxism thing is he lived in a different time. You know, and this is where I actually really do feel for him because he felt for his fellow man. You know, the same way I feel for a fellow South African who is suffering in this current time in
sure.
COVID, or my fellow comedians who can't find a job and have to do something else or scrape to get by, and any fellow performer for that matter, or human being. I think he felt the same way. You know, he saw what this in his from his perspective, this evil machine that the working machine, this capitalist economy, what it was doing to some of his people. And yes, they were working in some of the most like the nastiest
Sure.
situations, and dealing with big machinery and dirty. And but again, we learned from our history. We learned that we can't keep our workers in certain conditions, which is why now, if a company is found, where there's no sanitation of the toilets. Like you have to keep your toilets clean. You have to have certain things in place. You can't have a business without a toilet, like an office without a toilet. You can't have this certain things without certain things. So we've learned from that past, and I think this is why using Marxist or using Marx in a current century that we're in is almost foolish, because it's like I like to bring it like to this, and I know this is sensitive for some people, but let's say Jesus was here now. I don't think it would be the same. I don't. It's a different time. Now I know religion is a
Yeah.
debatable thing, but if you take anything, if you take a caveman and you put him here now today, he'd be freaking out. And probably really fat too, because he used to run and hunt and go and get he has to hunt for his food back in that day, and now he can have Mr. Delivery. So I mean, it's we've evolved. We're different. We're in a
Sure.
different time. That's
Yeah, absolutely. And I think just to add to that, like I think were I critiques in Marx, but the solutions offered are shit, basically. So yeah, it's one thing to point out the way a system functions or where it goes wrong. It's another thing to prescribe a utopian vision which goes against all that we know of human nature and all that we know of actually what makes the economy run well. So yeah, there is a room for the critique of the base. There is a room for the critique of the superstructure in some ways. But if the prescription for that is socialism, communism, I'm out. I don't want any piece of that. And if you do, you really need to examine your understanding of history.
absolutely the divided party says. I think it's an opinion. Marx had, I don't know. Oh, Caiaphas syndrome. He and Engels, that guy that co-wrote the book, they called the book the Holy Family. His labor theory of value of is Old Testament theory and disrespecting value of ideas. Yeah, that's pretty much it. I agree with that. That's a very good opinion. Definitely. And then Beth Symes says, but also the beauty of free market is you can choose your own marketing conditions. To swap the toilet thing for an emotionally toxic work environment, you can look elsewhere for work. Exactly.
Sure.
If you're not happy with the current condition, the current, the business does certain things, then you can move on. You can find somewhere else that will take better care. It's the same with how some businesses offer dental or healthcare or
Yeah.
whatever. You can, if you want a business that offers that, then you have the option of going to find that. It's as simple as that. So yeah, I see we've hit the hour. I'm just going to quickly see if there's any questions that I may have missed. Guys, if there is a question that I missed, I am scrolling through. But if there's one that you really want to ask, please ask. Please ask. But I think I have touched on everything. I'm not sure if this is a question, so I won't. To each according to his needs seems contrary to the equality of out. Okay, wait. This. I think did we touch on this? To each according to his needs seems contrary to the equality of outcomes often attributed to Marxists. No, Engels, from what I've read, always thought equality of opportunity was impossible too. Interesting.
Hmm.
Interesting. Well, I would argue that again, he wrote a book 150 years ago, and free market has proved that you can have equal opportunity, even though yes, it is corrupt. When implemented correctly, there is equality for opportunity. The problem is, again, here's the thing. This might be good to end off on, but we need to acknowledge that in both free market and Marxism, there's a human element, and humans are imperfect. We are
Yeah.
an imperfect species. So, in free market, there are a lot of problems, but free market has been proven to save civilizations.
Absolutely.
So, when you compare it in that regard, I would choose free market. Free market offers opportunity. The
Yeah.
human element is what gets in the way. Let's take South Africa for example. BEE. I don't know. I'm sure you've seen on Twitter, Quentin, that BEE is
I've
highly
been
being.
arguing about it a lot. So.
Exactly. It is a hot topic at the moment, especially on Twitter, and maybe throughout the lockdown because of all the regulations that have been happening in South Africa and stuff like that. It's a big, big topic, and regulations like that are what restrict. It's not a free market. It's not. If you have a regulation
No, no,
that like BE, it is not a free market. With therefore, South Africa has never actually had a free market.
no,
Yeah. So
no. And apartheid was like not a free market either, but it was even less free because black people couldn't participate in certain aspects
yeah,
of it that were kind of, managed through market forces and stuff like that.
yeah,
So to say that, yeah, black people got poor in South Africa because of capitalism, no. Most African societies were actually in the feudal state, and then South Africa, under the centralized government, had sort of a quasi-socialist sort of aspect going on there. So it wasn't that it was capitalism. That the South African Communist Party appealed to the working masses during the ANC struggle for apartheid, and that's why the ANC and the SACP are still in the same WhatsApp group. But anyway, go on, man.
Look, I do want to have you back on the show to discuss maybe a little bit more to home the ANC and what's going on now, because I think even in our discussion now, it was very easy to bring it home. It was very easy to say, oh well, Quentin just said this about communism, or we just discussed this about communism, and look what's happening here. So I think it would be interesting to have a discussion about that. Um, and finishing off with Chico's comment, imperfection means everyone cannot be equal. I have to
Yeah.
agree. As much as look, I was actually also discussing this with my wife. Like, she believes that there's equality is fake. There's no such thing. It's a farce. It's a tool being used to drive agendas and stuff like that. And I do agree with her to a certain extent. But I think what people fall in love with is the idea of equal opportunities. And I think that is a fair ambition for humans to get to. What we need to realize is that unfortunately we need to start taking control, and this is not a cry to anarchy, I'm just saying. I need to be careful with what I'm about to say. We need to take control of our lives by going to the polls and voting for those who we can see are true and honest. And those that carry values that really want to better every South African. And this applies anywhere in the world. If you can find someone, and I know politicians lie and all that stuff, I get it. But if we can see through the BS, and we can see that someone has good intentions and wants to give the civilians the opportunities that they deserve to provide for their family, then I say give them the vote. But that's up to everybody to judge for themselves. I can't. I mean, everywhere in the world is different. It's easier said than done.
Yeah, I'd say just be careful where someone says they're concerned for the poor, but what they actually do is resent the rich. And Orwell pointed that out about many socialists, that it wasn't so much of that they were motivated by love for the poor, it was resentment for the rich and for the successful. So I would vote for someone who would say, well, actually, I want to increase your freedom to pursue whatever avenues you can and hopefully find success in them, rather than someone who would take from someone else's freedom under the auspices of redistributing for the common good. It just never works, guys.
Yeah. Quentin for president.
Fuck that. South Africa deserves better.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, on that note, Quentin, thank you so much for joining me again. This was very fun. I enjoyed this. This was nice.
Me too,
Bit of a philosophy kind of discussion. And to everybody that tuned in Divided Party, I am going to have the Divided Party on my show soon. I must actually start doing my admin. Beth Symes, thank you so much. Chico, everybody else, this was a perfect discussion. A lot of you had different opinions and different ideas. I love seeing that. You're more than welcome. Lito, thank you for joining in. Inside Digital, thank you. Mitch, thank you so much. And of course, Kyle, and I don't know if these people are still here, The Punisher, and Sue Ellen Jane. Thank you all so much. And everybody else who tuned in, thank you all so much. Subscribe, like this video so it gets out there. Please like this video. And tomorrow night I will have Conscious Caracal on the show, so please tune into that at 8:30. We're going to be discussing the changing of the constitution of the electoral voting, and we're going to go into more of that. That you can vote for an individual now, and also be able to hold that individual accountable. That's a very important note to take. So we're going to be discussing that with him. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you, Quentin. And
Thanks, Joe.
I'll see you guys at the next one. Peace.